Today we're going to start our new unit on solving quadratic equations by factoring. So we've solved other equations which are linear equations, but this type of equation is actually solved slightly differently than a regular equation where we distribute, combine, and so on. So how do we solve a quadratic equation? Well, before we get into that, we want to make sure what makes an equation a quadratic. So here are a few examples of quadratic equations and non-quadratic equations, just to refresh our memories as to what they are. So we're looking at these sets of quadratic equations on the left. Let's realize that all of them have the power of 2 on them, whereas the ones on the right don't all have the power of 2. Some of them do, some of them don't. So again, that power of 2 is our indicator that something is a quadratic equation. The ones on the right, even though some of them do have that power of 2, they do have an even bigger power, which makes them not quadratic. The first two on the row, on the not quadratic side, are just regular linear equations, or expressions, I should say. All right, so again, here's a multitude of quadratics. Again, let's just box in the part that makes them quadratic, which is the term that has the x squared on it. So that's what makes all of these quadratics. So now that we have that, let's just kind of formalize our definition. A quadratic equation is an equation where 2 is the highest power on the variable. So this is what quadratic equations tend to look like. We always want to have that equal to 0 on the right side in order to be able to solve these. And we'll get more into that tomorrow as well. Let's look at 3 quick examples. Answer just to yourself, is this a quadratic equation, yes or no? For number 1, if you answered yes, you are correct. What about number 2? Is that a quadratic equation, yes or no? If you answered no, you are correct as well. It's missing the x to the power of 2. Last one, is that a quadratic equation, yes or no? If you answered yes, you're also correct. All right, so here are a few more. Just quickly go through them and answer yes or no in your head, and I will give you the answers in about 10 seconds or so. All right, so first one you should have said yes, second no, third yes, fourth no, yes, fifth no because of the power of 3, and the sixth one a yes. So just as now that we kind of have an idea of these quadratic equations, let's go ahead and start solving for x on these quadratic equations. All right, so how do we find the solutions to a quadratic? Meaning if we have something like this, what is the answer for x that makes the left side equal to 0? So that's the question. So we want to find the x values. It can be a whole number, it can be a decimal number, it can be a fraction. So how do we find for x? Because subtracting 1 will not help us. Combining like terms, there's nothing to combine. You cannot combine the 4x squared with a negative 2x. They're not like terms. We're not allowed to do that. So there are 3 ways to find the solutions to a quadratic. So there's 3 ways to solve for x. First way, which we're going to go over today, is using factoring, which we went over all last 2 weeks. And this is usually the fastest way, but unfortunately it doesn't always work, especially when our x factor fails. Then we can't use factoring. That's why we need 2 other ways as well. The second way is just a formula that was used from another form of solving, which is called the quadratic formula. This might look familiar. It always works. Only thing is you need to memorize this formula. It's a little intense looking. And the last method is something called completing the square, which we'll be getting into on Wednesday. And the quadratic formula, we'll be getting into it next week on Tuesday. All right, so let's go ahead and start actually solving some of these problems. And the process, the part in blue, we just factor, and then we just use that zero product property, which we just went over a few minutes ago. So let's go ahead and get started. So we factor as we've been factoring. In this case, the good thing is we can use our shortcut. So we go ahead and use it because we have that 1 in the front. So let's go ahead and set up our x factor. 1 times 18 is 18. 9 goes at the bottom. We solve 6 times 3 is 18. 6 plus 3 equals 9. So we set up our 2 factors using that shortcut. We have x plus 6, x plus 3. And the only difference now is we have that equals to 0 piece. Now, since this is an equation, we go ahead and solve it, which means I'm going to set up 2 individual equations using the zero product property. Either the first factor, x plus 6 is 0, or the second factor, x plus 3 is equal to 0. One of them has to be equal to 0 in order for this equation to equal to 0. So let's go ahead and solve each one individually. Subtract 6 on both sides. X is equal to negative 6. Solve the other equation. X is equal to negative 3. So there's two options for x. Either x is equal to negative 6, or I'm going to put the word in between. X is equal to negative 3. It's not both at the same time, only one or the other. So there's two possible solutions where this expression up here is equal to 0. So again, if I plug in a negative 6 into the equation, I'll get 0. If I plug in negative 3 into the equation, I'll also get 0. And that's how we solve a quadratic. Factor, solve each factor to 0 using the product property, zero product property. All right, let's move on to the next problem. And if you want, you can go ahead and solve each one ahead of time and just check your answers. So let's go ahead and set up this one as well. So again, the good thing about this one, we also have a 1 in front. We can use our shortcut, which means negative 20 at the top, negative 8 at the bottom. Find the two numbers that multiply to 20, subtract to give me 8, so that's 10 times 2, where the 10 is negative. I'm going to use my factoring shortcut because I do have a 1 as my a value. So I'm setting it up, and this is equal to 0. This is an equation now, so we're going to go ahead and solve it. So I'm going to go ahead and solve each one. Either the first piece, m minus 10 is equal to 0, or the other option is m plus 2 is equal to 0. It's one or the other, so I'm going to get two answers. So if I add 10 to both sides, I get 10 as one answer. Subtract 2 to both sides. My other answer is m is equal to negative 2. So again, I got two solutions that will make this equation equal to 0. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Number 3, we're going to go ahead and set it up. Unfortunately, we will not be able to use the shortcut because of this 2 right there, so we're going to have to do it with grouping. So let's go ahead and set up our x factor. 2 times 3 is 6, and 5 goes at the bottom. So we're going to use the numbers 2 times 3 is equal to 6, and 2 plus 3 equals 5. So again, here I cannot use my shortcut. I'm going to have to solve it with grouping, so I'm going to set up my 4 terms. I'm going to split this middle term. So let's go ahead and put 2x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 3 equal to 0. All right, let's go ahead and use grouping. I'm going to split it in half. So these have a GCF of 2 and an x. So I'm going to factor out a 2x. And I'm left with x plus 1. On the right side, they both have a GCF of a 3 in common, so I'm going to put a positive 3 on the outside, and I'm left with an x plus 1. And this still equals 0, so I'll write that in later. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor, because we have a common binomial, and we're left with 2x from here plus 3. And this whole thing is equal to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve each one individually. So either x plus 1 equal to 0, or 2x plus 3 is equal to 0. Kind of running out of room, so you can always write onto the side. So I'm just going to take this piece and rewrite it up here on the side because I'm kind of trapped for room here. So I'm just going to rewrite it up here. And 2x plus 3 equal to 0. All right, so we have it just rewritten. I'm going to solve each one, subtract 1, x equals to 1. At this point, if you can skip some of the steps, that's fine. Just be very careful for skipping steps on the right equation, because we do subtract 3 on both sides. And we're left with 2x equal to negative 3. Sorry, it's coming out a little sloppy. But this one's not solved for x, so here we still have to go ahead and divide to finish it off. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And my final answer is x is equal to negative 3 over 2. And just bring down the x equal to 1 again. So my final answer is x can be positive 1 or x can be negative 3/2, or if you prefer to put negative 1.5. All right, so I want you guys to try out the next two problems on your own now. Pause the video and come back to check your answers. So now that you've tried out number 4 and 5, let's go ahead and check if you got the right answers. So I'm just going to quickly put the answers out here. You should have gotten x equal to 5 negative, or x equal to negative 7. Those should have been your two answers. For the second one, your answer should have been, let's see, x equals to 6 or x equals to 5. Which one is a negative one? Let me quickly figure it out. I believe the 6 is a negative. So sorry, I was just double checking those answers. But yeah, these are the correct answers. If you got them, you're good to go. Move on, start the practice. Otherwise, just stay on. So for whatever reason, you did not get number 4 right. Let's just quickly go through it just to make sure you didn't forget a negative somewhere or make a small mistake. So again, 35 goes up here, 12 goes up here. You can use a shortcut. 7 times 5 are your factors that solve the x factor. Shortcut gives us n plus 7, n plus 5 equal to 0. So we get n equal to negative 7 when you solve the first one, n equal to negative 5 when you solve the second one, after solving the individual equations. So again, subtract 7 on both sides, subtract 5. All right, for the next one, let's just check that you have that one correct too, just in case there was a tiny mistake somewhere. The next one as well, you can use the factoring shortcut. We have 30 on the top, what's negative, 1 on the bottom. Your signs are backwards, probably somewhere here. 6 times 5 is 30, where the 5 is negative. We can also use a shortcut here, which is really nice to do. X plus 6 and x minus 5 are my two factors. And we're solving each one separately, x plus 6, x minus 5. And we just subtract 6 on both sides. Get x equal to negative 6, or add 5 to both sides. Get x equal to 5. All right, so again, now that you've checked your answers, made any corrections, go ahead and start your practice. Good luck.